Good morning. Welcome back to the Southern Bible Thumper channel. For this upload, we will be reading Deuteronomy chapter 12. These are the statutes and judgments which ye shall observe to do in the land which the Lord God of thy fathers giveth thee to possess it all the days that ye live upon the earth. Ye shall utterly destroy all the places wherein the nations which ye shall possess served their gods, upon the high mountains, and upon the hills, and under every green tree. And ye shall overthrow their altars, and break their pillars, and burn their groves with fire. And ye shall hew down the graven images of their gods, and destroy the names of them out of that place. Ye shall not do so unto the Lord your God, but unto the place which the Lord your God shall choose out of all your tribes to put his name there, even unto his habitation shall ye seek, and thither thou shalt come. And thither ye shall bring your burnt offerings, and your sacrifices, and your tithes, and heave offerings of your hand, and your vows, and your freewill offerings, and the firstlings of your herds and of your flocks. And there ye shall eat before the Lord your God, and ye shall rejoice in all that ye put your hand unto, ye and your households, wherein the Lord thy God hath blessed thee. Ye shall not do after all the things that we do here this day, every man whatsoever is right in his own eyes. For ye are not as yet come to the rest and to the inheritance which the Lord your God giveth you. But when ye go over Jordan, and dwell in the land which the Lord your God giveth you to inherit, and when he giveth you rest from all your enemies round about, so that ye dwell in safety, then there shall be a place which the Lord your God shall choose to cause his name to dwell there. Thither shall ye bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings, and your sacrifices, your tithes, and the heave offering of your hand, and all your choice vows which ye vow unto the Lord. And ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God, ye, and your sons, and your daughters, and your men servants, and your maidservants, and the Levite that is within your gates, forasmuch as he hath no part nor inheritance with you. Take heed to thyself, that thou offer not thy burnt offerings in every place that thou seest, but in the place which the Lord shall choose in one of thy tribes, there thou shalt offer thy burnt offerings, and there thou shalt do all that I command thee. Notwithstanding, thou mayest kill and eat flesh in all thy gates, whatsoever thy soul lusteth after, according to the blessing of the Lord thy God, which he hath given thee. The unclean and the clean may eat thereof, as of the roebuck, and as of the hart. Only ye shall not eat the blood, ye shall pour it upon the earth as water. Thou mayest not eat within thy gates the tithe of thy corn, or of thy wine, or of thy oil, or the firstlings of thy herds, or of thy flock, nor any of thy vows which thou vowest, nor thy freewill offering or heave offering of thine hand. But thou must eat them before the Lord thy God in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose, thou and thy son and thy daughter and thy manservant and thy maidservant and the Levite that is within thy gates. And thou shalt rejoice before the Lord thy God in all that thou puttest thine hands unto. Take heed to thyself that thou forsake not the Levite as long as thou livest upon the earth. When the Lord thy God shall enlarge thy border, as he hath promised thee, and thou shalt say, I will eat flesh, because thy soul longeth to eat flesh. Thou mayest eat flesh, whatsoever thy soul lusteth after. If the place which the Lord thy God hath chosen to put his name there be too far from thee, then thou shalt kill of thy herd and of thy flock which the Lord hath given thee, as I have commanded thee, and thou shalt eat in thy gates whatsoever thy soul lusteth after, even as the roebuck and the hart is eaten, so thou shalt eat them. The unclean and the clean shall eat of them alike. Only be sure that thou eat not the blood, for the blood is the life, and thou mayest not eat the life with the flesh. Thou shalt not eat it. Thou shalt pour it upon the earth as water. Thou shalt not eat it, that it may go well with thee, and with thy children after thee, when thou shalt do that which is right in the sight of the Lord. Only thy holy things which thou hast in thy vows thou shalt take, and go unto the place which the Lord shall choose. And thou shalt offer thy burnt offerings, the flesh and the blood, upon the altar of the Lord thy God. And the blood of thy sacrifices shall be poured out upon the altar of the Lord thy God, and thou shalt eat the flesh. Observe and hear all these words which I command thee, that it may go well with thee and with thy children after thee forever. when thou doest that which is good and right in the sight of the Lord thy God. When the Lord thy God shall cut off the nations from before thee, whither thou goest to possess them, and thou succeedest them, and dwellest in their land. Take heed to thyself that thou be not snared by following them, after that they be destroyed from before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, how do these nations serve their God? Even so will I do likewise. Thou shalt not do so unto the Lord thy God, for every abomination to the Lord, which he hateth, have they done unto their gods. For even their sons and their daughters they have burnt in the fire to their gods. That things soever I command you, what things soever I command you, observe to do it. Thou shalt not add thereto, nor diminish from it. Almost perfect. Summarizing Deuteronomy chapter 12, Moses is still talking to Israel. This is the second generation out of Egypt. So when Moses left and they parted the Red Sea, that generation has completely died off. It's just him and this next generation. So he's talking to them about the events that have happened up until now because he wants them to understand the importance. Once he dies, they're only going to have Joshua as leader. And though Joshua has the right mentality and the right heart, he's young, he's unseasoned and inexperienced. So he will most likely make a few mistakes leading this group of people who, well, their parents have been contentious. Maybe this group will be better. Anyways, this is why he's taking so long, and this is actually nice to give this much space to someone like Moses to show how much he's repeating himself, how much he's sort of dragging this out, because he's going to die alone in a mountain. Neither of his wives have been mentioned, neither have his children been mentioned. His brother is dead, his brother's sons are dead, his sister is dead, and that was all because of his leadership with Israel. So he disobeyed God one time, and it was severe enough for God to tell him he wasn't going to come to the promised land with Israel, even though he was faithful after that. So now we're at the end of Moses' life, and he wants to give all the information that he has to this next generation. So in verses 1 through 3, this is a reference to 3 different chapters. So we see here, destroy their gods, destroy their Asherim poles, chop down their carved images. So the first time this was commanded was in Exodus chapter 34, verse 13. Then we see the same thing in Numbers chapter 33, verses 50 through 56. We also see the same command in Deuteronomy chapter 7. But Moses is telling them again, even though he said this in Deuteronomy chapter 7. Verses 4 through 5. Do not worship God, incorporating their customs or locations. Seek God that he can tell you where to go. So what this is saying here is don't use any of their practices, locations, customs to serve your God. God has already given you your own customs that he wants you to keep, your own traditions, and God will also show you where he wants you to put a place of worship for him. But don't use the already existing locations, actually destroy them, destroy everything that they've built, and construct what God tells you to. Interesting, in verse 6, we see the word tithes. Now, I am very interested in this because this is something that I want to know. Should we be paying tithes? If so, how often? What percentage? How does that become deducted? We need to, I just want to know more. And a lot of times, I'm not going to say that, okay? Because it's not my business how other people run their institutions. But I want to know how we arrive at tithes and offerings every Sunday. So we have it here. Does it say anything about the percentage or anything? It just says When God gives you a location, bring your tithes to this location. Verse 7, only eat from sacrifices at the place of worship that God designated. In verse 8, you can't live by your own rules when you go to Canaan. Because what Moses was telling them is like, right now, you don't have any organization, you're not living by the correct rules, but when you get into Canaan, it's going to be imperative because you'll perish if you don't take this seriously. So I'm also not going to show these verses, but I just want to explain or just give you the evidence of how Canaan is the land mentioned, because for some time I was saying promised land because I didn't see it being mentioned. The way that we know that this land that they're going to is Canaan is when we look at Numbers chapter 32, Numbers chapter 34, and Numbers chapter 35. Canaan is specifically listed as the land that would be taken by the Israelites. The reason why this is significant is because there is a long-standing history of immorality associated with Canaan, and that comes from Genesis. When Noah passed out, he was drunk, and his grandson Canaan, there was some strange incident. The Bible is not clear. What it says is when Noah awoke, he known what his youngest son done to him. He had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. It is not clear the order or the ages of these men. So the youngest son in that scenario would have been Canaan. So I did mention in that video, it was Genesis, I think it was Genesis 11, or let me look. It was Genesis chapter 9. So Genesis chapter 9, the weird thing with Canaan. So after that happens, when we look at Genesis chapter 10, verse 19, this details Canaan's lineage and what territories his lineage occupied, and it includes Sodom and Gomorrah. Genesis chapter 10. So we know what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah when 2 angels came to visit Lot, and the whole town wanted to one of those men for sex. So we know about that. And then when we look at Leviticus chapter 18, verse 3, Canaan is discussed and listed as the land that Israel will take over. And then it also says in verses 24 through 25, it's explaining why the land is vomiting out these people. It's because they're committing all of these immoral acts that is making the land sick. So we left off before we segued into making it clear the connection of Canaan from the book of Genesis and how sexual immorality has followed Canaan up until now. And now they're getting ready to overtake this land. And it even says in this chapter that they've committed every abomination that God hates. Now we're in verse 9 of Deuteronomy chapter 12. Moses explains, once you get into this new land, it's imperative that you change and follow the laws that I've been giving you. God will give you peace over your enemies. And then we get into the repetitive, because we've already seen earlier in verses 1 through 3 that Moses is referencing Deuteronomy chapter 7. But he's going to go in here and he's referencing verse 5. From verses 11 through verses 14, he's repeating himself. He's repeating that God will establish a place of worship among Israel. Verse 15, eat what you want in your city. This was another thing that was a big deal because we did see all those dietary restrictions. And this was mentioned twice. So to now come here and it's saying, Moses is telling Israel, this is not God telling Moses, this is Moses telling Israel. So not assigning any type of anything, but I just want you to know this is Moses speaking, and this not one time has God said, or the Bible said, and the Lord said to Moses. This is Moses speaking. He's repeating himself. He's like a grandfather, and he's getting ready to die. So this is repeating himself in the same passage. Eat what you want in your city. Clean and unclean animals are permitted. Verse 16, do not eat the blood. Pour the blood on the earth. Then we get to verses 17 through 18, and this is another repeating or repetitive section that's repeating what was said in verses 6 through 7 in this same chapter. You cannot eat the tithe that you give freely, just in the designated places that God establishes. But we also see the word tithe again. And again, this tithe there is no action around when tithe is mentioned, God is not telling them you have to give this amount. This is just saying, when you get a location, bring your tithe to this location. But there is no percentage discussed or specifying that it's money. All it's saying is, when you get this, you bring this here when you get this location. So tithe is mentioned twice in this chapter, but there is no action around it. Verse 19, do not abandon or forget the Levites as long as you live. Because remember, the Levites don't get a special inheritance among the Israelites. So the Israelites sort of have to look out for them. Verse 20, you can eat whatever you want. And then 21, if the holy place is too far, then kill the animal and eat it at your convenience. Verse 22, and it's saying again, you can eat the clean and unclean animals, repeating himself again. And this is referencing verse 15. Then we look at verses 23 and 24. Just don't eat the blood. Don't eat the blood. Don't eat the blood. And that is referencing or repeating what was said in verse 16. Verse 25, things will go well if you follow God's commands. Verse 26, your holy things, your vows, your offerings should be done in the place that God establishes. Verse 27, offer the flesh and the blood on the altar. Pour the blood out, but you're welcome to eat the flesh. Verse 28, listen and obey these commands. This is verses 28 through 31. Listen and obey these commands. You and your children will have peace forever. Do not become deceived in the new land or worship their gods. These inhabitants have done every type of abomination to honor their gods, including burning their children to death. Then verse 32, follow these commands. Do not add or subtract from it. The only highlight that I have is mentioning that it's now okay to eat anything according to Moses. The other two times this was commanded in the Bible, God specifically spoke it to where did I see that? I'm going to just look it up really quick. Leviticus 18, maybe? Leviticus 16. Okay, so Leviticus chapter 11, I was very sure that there was another list of food, but Leviticus chapter 11 was specific about the animals that we're not supposed to eat. So it just kind of seems like now Moses is saying, yeah, just eat whatever you want. But Leviticus 11, God spoke to Moses. So there were a couple of other little incidents like that I noticed Moses seemed like God didn't say that to him, or the Bible doesn't note God telling him to say something before he did it, or said it. But again, I appreciate that this chapter is giving Moses his humanity because this is a tough place to be. He was socialized as an Egyptian, mistaken by his wife as an Egyptian, but he still had a loyalty and a love for his own people. That even he didn't even stay with his wives or children. He lost his brother, lost his brother's sons, lost his sister. And for all that loyalty, for all that, he's been burdened with a headache, and he's going to die alone as his reward. So, just says something about the realest one sometimes. You know, even Jesus was the realest one. He was beaten for our transgressions. That's another reason why it's such a weird concept to think you need to get beaten for anything. Means you don't believe and accept what God did for you. Your works are as you're right. You can't ever do anything enough to make up for your sins as a human. So, okay. I don't know. I don't want to say I'm in a strange mood, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm off today. I'll get it together. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I love you. Me and you are going to have a wonderful day. Goodbye.